morning, good afternoon, good evening. Zimbabwe is a failed state because for the last 45 years since the country's independence, the nation has been stuck with a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical Zanu PF dictatorship. Zanu PF's hunger for absolute power is insatiable. The regime has shown that it was prepared to burn the whole house down than let anybody else rule it. That hunger was demonstrated several times since the country's independence. The Lancaster House talks, it was agreed that ZAPU and ZANU, the two parties that had freedom fighters, would take their freedom fighters back to assembly points during the campaign period. Zanu PF agreed to it at the Lancaster House, but by the time they got back to Zimbabwe, the party had changed its mind. Many of Zanu PF's freedom fighters were left in the field, and their instruction was to tell the electorate that Zanu PF was prepared to let the Bush war continue if they lost the elections. Of course, the people voted to end the Bush war. Little did they know that they were giving up their right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country forever. Because as soon as Zanu PF got his feet under the desk, the regime instigated the Kukura-Wundi. The primary purpose of the Kukura-Wundi was to force the only other political party that posed a serious challenge to Zanu PF's continued rule, i.e. ZAPU, to give up its claim of being an independent party. And the late Dr. Joshua Nkomo and his colleagues finally did with the signing of the 1987 Unity Accord. That cleared the way for the formation of the Zanu PF and the imposition of the de facto one-party state that was to rule the country to this day. Zanu PF determination to burn the whole house down and the opponents, and these political opponents in it, just to retain power, was most graphically illustrated in the 2008 elections, when SADC had forced the regime to implement some reforms leading up to what has been the nearest the country has ever got to holding free, fair, and credible elections. And Zanu PF, when they realized they lost those elections, they resorted back to wanton violence. Here is a description of what happened in 2008 from Dr. Mandas.
I also know that Mugabe conceded defeat on 2008. He phoned Mbeki and Obasanjo to concede defeat. I hope that Thabo Mbeki and Obasanjo will one day make that public. But one of them, I won't say which one, told me that Mugabe phoned them that Saturday night and said, look, I lost the election and I concede defeat. And I know that Mugabe stuck to his guns. I was prepared to go. His wife was since bags packed to go somewhere on the following day when Mnangagwa and Chiwenga approached him and said, you stay where you are. And then they contrived the runoff, sadly with the help of South Africa. And runoff took place, very violent. 360 people were killed. I don't know. The South African, I came here as part of a delegation to Cape Town to see members of the ANC. I don't want to mention names, they're my friends. I saw them, and through them, a cabinet committee subcommittee of South African cabinet was set up on the Zimbabwe issue. It was on the basis of that cabinet committee that South Africa did not recognize the runoff. And indeed, it was the basis of that committee that Thabo sent the generals to South Africa, to Zimbabwe. I met them, and I was one of the few to have read the report, because I was flying to Joburg in the company of General Romano, who was a friend. He passed away, no? That's why, yeah. And I also took people who had lost their hands in the violence to the South African embassy in Harare. And Romano broke down in tears. How can a liberation movement treat its people like that? He was a broken man. So there's no doubt at all here in South Africa as to the brutality of the regime in Harare. So it amazes me, it angers me, in fact, when I hear the nonsense coming out of people like Mbalula's mouth. They know it.
So the brutality of the Zanu PF regime is well documented. I mean, it's not open for discussion. It's a historic fact. I think what most people find amazing is that post the GNU, Zanu PF and the opposition have established a new relationship. What has happened? Here is Mnangagwa boasting about the new relationship between Zanu PF and the opposition.
I'm happy that in Zimbabwe, hakuna friction between the ruling party and the opposition party. But it is critically important that we must have an opposition which must check on the ruling party. So members of the opposition, make sure you deal with the ruling party. Don't make them sit. Make sure you make them busy, the opposition. Musamboregera. Nyanga bakadini, rambai mchingo criticize, kuseni masikati criticize. That way, no basi tuwarambi vari power. No kuti. Vanenge vachidiscover my mistakes ava vachicorrect. Ivi muchingorova. Nokuti mukasivarova vanorelaxa mozotora power. So my advice to opposition, please be serious in opposition. ndokuti murambe muri muopposition.
It may sound like a sick joke from Mnangagwa, but it is the fundamental truth. Ever since the 2008 to 2018 GNU, Zanu PF and the opposition have been working together. The MDC leaders during the 2008 to 2018 GNU had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms. They failed to implement even one reform. Not even one. Why? Because Mugabe bribed them with the trappings of high office, and they accepted it. And not only accepted it, they were so comfortable, they forgot about implementing reforms. They failed to implement even one token reform. So that at the end of the GNU in 2018, Zanu PF still had its dictatorial powers intact, untouched. This is a new relationship. This was sending a clear message to Zanu PF that we in the opposition are not a threat to Zanu PF's hold on power. This was redefining the relationship between Zanu PF and the opposition. They were going to cooperate. There are certain areas the opposition accepted as untouchable. Don't touch there. Don't touch there. Anything that threatens Zanu PF's iron grip on power was untouchable. The opposition accepted that. And hence the reason why they've continued to participate post the GNU in flawed elections, knowing fully well that the process is flawed, knowing fully well that participating in those flawed elections would only give Zanu PF legitimacy. But they were so determined to do so, they even lied to their own supporters to con them to participate. One of the problems we have had in Zimbabwe is that the ordinary people themselves have failed to realize that the opposition are now running with a povo hair and yet hunting with the Zanu PF hounds. The last 2 years has been an uphill struggle just to convince some people that Chamisa lied to them. How is it possible that you cannot reconcile yourself with the reality on the ground? Here are the facts. Chamisa said he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. The people believed that. And they participated in the 2023 elections, convinced Chamisa and company would win.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe, nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifoiri. Plan yaMwari haifoiri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
He even evoked the name of God, for Pete's sake. Plan ya Mwari haifuiri. And yet Zanu PF blatantly rigged those elections. The very thing that he said would not happen, Zanu PF blatantly rigged those elections. He had insisted that it was God's plan. Of course it was not, because if it was God's plan, Zanu PF would have failed to rig those elections. The refusal by millions of people to accept that Chamisa lied to them is at the heart of why Zimbabwe is stuck. Because the reality is, you will con them yet again. We have not put an end to this. 2028 is just around the corner. And Chamisa is saying, God is in it, I am fired up. In other words, I'm going to win 2028 elections. Use the same idiotic lies. I will stop Zanu PF rigging the elections and I'll win those elections. And people will believe him. Participate in those flawed elections, give Zanu PF legitimacy, and we're back where we are. It is a tragedy that 45 years after independence, we are failing to hold free, fair, and credible elections. Absolutely unbelievable. How is it possible that something as simple and straightforward as what constitutes free, fair, and credible elections, let's go ahead and hold elections for ourselves. We are failing to do so. Here is Margaret Dongo, an opposition leader well known to many people in Zimbabwe, and herself a former Zanu PF member of parliament and a freedom fighter in her own right, speaking on the issue of how MDC leaders sold out during these last 2023 elections.
Politics is not a business. This is what I want to remind most of our MPs and other people.
Do you think they look at it as a business?
Yes, they look at it as a business. Because they look at it as a business, seriously. Because the moment they go, business and employment creation, because if they go to parliament, you are employed. You get a car, you get a stable salary, and you are paid until your term is over. Already you are employed. If you are out, you're out of employment.
If you serve 2 terms, you get a pension?
Hello there, how you doing? Have you ever thought to be successful in property, you need to be really experienced and really...
Sorry about that.
You get a pension. Then already, this is why people kill in politics. They kill to be in parliament. This is why we have violence in this country. Because there is no employment. The only employment which is there is in politics. There is no other outside employment. So for them, a very good example is, look at what happened to CCC, the Triple C party. Have a look. When they lost, when they said they were rigged, what I expected from them, I expected all parliamentarians to say, we are not going to go to participate in a rigged system. And we are not going to sit in a rigged parliament. Because the elections have been rigged. So all of us were not going to parliament. Imagine what could have happened. We could have gone into new elections. There's no way Zanu PF was going to rule alone.
You think so?
Yes.
Do they care?
Caring or not caring, the public would have forced them because the majority of the people would want representation in parliament.
But they went anyway?
But they went. They realized that, you heard them complain, I used my own money to be in parliament. But what about me who have voted for you? I used my own money. So the idea is to recover. Is it a business where you want to recover your losses?
And I think it will be pertinent also to add here that they are doing it at the expense of the ordinary people. The number one purpose of electing these MDC leaders into parliament was so that they would implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF breaking the elections. And now the same individuals have not only sold out on implementing reforms, they were now participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy. Like I said, MDC CCC leaders are Zanu PF Team B in all but name. And hence the reason why Mnangagwa was boasting that there is no friction between Zanu PF and the opposition. The people, or some of the people, still think that the opposition are dismantling Zanu PF. After 25 years without even one token reform implemented, the alarm bells should have been ringing that the opposition are no longer fighting in the people's corner. And as long as we have an opposition that is fighting in Zanu PF's corner, of course, Zanu PF is happy with the arrangement. It is for us, the people, to break up this cozy relationship where the opposition now are Zanu PF Team B in all but name. That message has got to be drilled home if we are going to stop millions of people being called to participate in 2028 elections, to give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate the dictatorship. This is where the real fight has got to take place. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.